and I'm living proof that it works.
Greg got hired for his senior officer role in 65 days. His story coming up. This is the Get Hired Show. Today's episode: how to increase your resume response rate from 1 to 2% to 40 to 70%. Give me some likes, give me some loves if you're eager to learn about today's topic. I want to know that you're excited about this. I'm Jewel Bracey DeMaio, Principal Job Search Strategist and Executive Coach, helping 6 and 7 figure directors, VPs, and C-level leaders get hired in 90 days or less, guaranteed. Now, the problem is when you know you're targeting jobs that perfectly match your background, but the response rate is minimal. The numbers are just poor, especially in comparison to the number of jobs that you've applied for. When the only thing you can count are the number of robot emails that say, oh, we've decided to go with another candidate, it's like, all right, why can't I even get a call back? And how can I get the hiring decision makers to acknowledge me at all? Not getting a response can be the biggest struggle when it comes to your job search, and it's virtually impossible for you to put a finger on why it's happening. It may be a lack of knowledge of the current trends and best practices in resume design and writing. You know, you can't write a resume today the way resumes were done 5 years ago. And drop me a quick comment in the chat and tell me if that may be the problem in your situation. You know, it could be, especially for senior level candidates, that an employer is looking at your extensive experience and immediately labeling you as overqualified, which, by the way, at its core is code for they don't want to pay you what they think you're going to command. So they're not giving you the chance to express that you're genuinely interested in that particular role. And I'm also curious to hear if that may have been a problem for you. So tell me in the comments. The ATS and the algorithms in this digital landscape may be the issue. So your resume could be getting kicked out in favor of younger candidates, even though you offer a wealth of experience and a skill set that comes with a longer professional history. Let's make sure to make this interactive. You can tell me if the ATS is automatically sending your resume into the black hole seemingly all the time. When resumes are processed through automated systems, the subtleties of your expertise and potential strategic contributions may be overlooked. So if you find yourself staring at either an empty inbox, an inbox filled with rejections, or sometimes worse, an inbox filled with insurance and truck driver jobs, now's the time to think about this issue differently. It's important to consider, how well does my resume align with the industry lingo? Your resume needs to include relevant terminology and showcase that you're aware of the language that that particular employer is speaking. You literally need to speak their language. Use keywords and phrases that match the job description and the industry standards, and there are specific ways to do that. Additionally, ask yourself, is my real story illustrated in my resume? Can the person reading it clearly know who I am, what I do, and the value that I bring? These are going to be the 3 pillars on which to build your story, which is your resume. Who I am, what I do, and the value that I bring. So this is called the WWV method. And these points are in that order for a very specific reason. Who I am is truly the only unique thing that you bring to the table, because a lot of people do what you do. You're not the only VP of marketing in America. You're not the only director of sales in America. You're not the only CFO in America. That's why who you are is first, what you do is second. And then we have to talk about the value that you bring, because your story is not merely a listing of all of these things, even if all the things are accomplishments and achievements. The resume is not a list. A list is boring. The onus is on you when presenting your story to highlight the value that you bring to the table for that particular employer. So the value that you bring has squarely to do with the following. Bear in mind that there are only two things that the employer cares about. First of all, understand that they care about themselves because it's a cold, hard corporate America out here. And the main two things they care about regarding themselves and their companies are, number one, do you understand what they need to accomplish now? And number two, have you indicated that you have the skills and expertise to deliver what they want to accomplish next? Now and next are what you always need to be talking about on your resume, in your story, in order to increase the likelihood that you'll get a response. And once you get that response rate up, we see an average of a 40% response rate. It's gone as high as 70% for some of the senior leaders that we support. What happens is you get into more conversations with the relevant recruiters and decision makers. You get more at-bats. So first, second, third, and fourth interviews, you're getting up at bat. And when you're going down that interview path for a handful of solid opportunities, you'll hear you're hired sooner rather than later. Greg got hired in 65 days. Also, in our LinkedIn recommendations, there are plenty of others. John got hired in less than 90 days for a director level role. He said our resume process was easy. Tony got her new job after a month of using our process, and she said the resume revamp gave her such a confidence boost, so she landed a senior director role. Let's get into this in a practical way so you learn exactly what to do to increase your resume response rate from 1 to 2% to 40 to 70%. Then I want us to hear Greg's story and how we use this particular strategy to get him hired in 65 days. And finally, we'll take a look on the screen so that you get actionable steps to implement in order to raise your resume response rate. I'll share this. I had a client who had gotten laid off after 27 years in the mortgage industry. The response that she was getting on her own was low, and she was feeling defeated in her job search. You can tell me in the comments if feelings like that have crept up on you at all. And that's when she made a decision to get professional help. Friends, that's what we call taking ownership of your career, and that's how you have to think about it. This is your career. This is your life. You decide what's going to happen in it, and then you execute. In this case, she made the decision to execute hand in hand with us. And she said we lit a fire in her and under her. More importantly, the responses that came in were on fire. A recruiter messaged her about an unpublished job, gave her what the posting was going to be, and it was a match for her background. They had a conversation the next day. There were 3 rounds of interviews over roughly 3 weeks. And then after the third interview, she got the offer 2 days later. So all of this came together for her in less than a month. She landed her new job. Here's specifically what we did to crank up her resume responses. We changed her strategy from just searching all the livelong day to a strategy of positioning her to get found. And you get found by using the right story in the first place. That story is the resume. We built her resume on those 3 core pillars: who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring. This is the WWV method. So what you want to do when you're talking about who you are, you want to be very specific about the level that you're on, director, VP, who you are in a professional sense. And let's say you are a director or VP. Those job titles always have a comma and then some words after that. So who you are may be a senior director of marketing, an SVP of marketing, a chief commercial officer, a CFO. Say that. And then what you want to talk about is something that's unique to you. So you are a senior vice president of sales who innovates and executes global sales strategy that drives double-digit revenue growth. Senior director of sales who, and then go right into what you do. Innovate and execute global sales strategy. And then you're going right into the value that you bring that drives double-digit sales growth. So we have those three elements in the very first sentence, in the very first line and a half of the resume. We've covered WWV. What this does is it starts off the resume with a bang. That's what you want to do. Because the example that I just gave you has life. It has action. And it's a lot more compelling and a lot more interesting than sitting there saying, director of sales with 25 years of experience. That's the way everybody starts off their resume. And most people have snooze jobs for resumes. Use the WWV method. Who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring. Let's have Greg tell us his success story, because getting that resume response rate up is what was critical to him getting hired.
Everything you're about to hear about over the next hour works, and I'm living proof that it works. I'm in marketing. I've been in marketing and television news for 25 plus years. I thought I could market myself. And I thought, well, getting jobs, this is what I've always done. Well, after about 14 months of a frustrating search to where you look back and go, what am I not explaining well? What aren't people getting? What's not translating? And then Jewel and I had a conversation, and I was skeptical when she said, you get a job in 90 days. If you do my system, you get a job in 90 days. Okay, yeah. And I remember asking her, I go, so what's your guarantee? And she's like, if you work the system works. And I'm here to tell you it works. And we'll talk about it more in detail, but I have a new job. I started January 9th. So my wife and family and I are in the process of moving from Florida to South Carolina. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes, but all the details are fantastic.
This is so excellent. So tell us what is the job title?
Job title is Senior Chief Communications Officer. I'm going to a school district in Columbia, South Carolina. I had a lot of education and media in my background. But this opportunity, I'm convinced that the redo of my resume and my LinkedIn profile certainly helped open the door and close it, I guess.
Now let's back up in the story. So first of all, you just touched on a probably not so great 14 months. And I think that was before you and I got together.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Kind of what was that journey in the first place before you and I met?
The journey was that I was open to all kinds of things, right? I mean, my career has been somewhat siloed in two areas, but at this move, I was really opening the door to anything, corporate communications, healthcare communications and all this, and was getting doors. I wasn't getting calls. I mean, I was applying for jobs. I was writing cover letters. I was putting my resume out there going, maybe I'm arrogant, but I think I should be a finalist for that position. And I didn't make the first round. So after rejection letter, after rejection email, after rejection email, you start going, what's not getting through here? And that's what it was. In 14 months of that, it'll drain you. It'll drain you to the point that you're like, maybe I'm not capable of doing what I'm trying to see. But then I realized, no, I mean, especially as a former journalist, you have a skill set, right? You have a skill set. And the hardest thing that journalists deal with is translating that skill set into other areas. And that's honestly what Jill did. We had a conversation for an hour, and I literally still in my notebook that I use to plan my day, basically almost like a journal. I have these phrases written down: disruptive thinker, big idea generator, relentless in maximizing revenue and innovation, reframes opinion, galvanizes audience, changes the game, a passionate storyteller with a relentless drive to innovate. She got all of that in an hour. We talked for an hour, and when the resume came back in, I looked at it, I had my wife look at it, and she goes, wow, she gets you. And Julie, you said something in that conversation that has stuck with me, and I've shared it with a lot of my marketing friends. As you said, you marketing people are special. You're good at marketing everything else except yourself, and it's true. It's true, and that was the biggest crime. I can tell you that when I started using this resume and was using these cover letters and the LinkedIn profile that worked in concert with it, there were no questions. Right? When I was talking to prospective employers, the questions were more about what I'm like, what I would require. It wasn't, are you competent or capable? Like, the resume took care of that. And that's a huge piece, because you can see that, to me, was the biggest issue for the first 14 months, was I couldn't prove to people that I had the skills that would cross over and be competent.
I think this is so important because the resume is obviously foundational, and it's the very first thing, and it needs to be correct. Because if it's not correct, then you're going to run into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And it's going to be for a year and a day, which is literally what Greg is talking about, right?
Right.
And so when we walk through the resume, let me also walk the people through kind of the process and the thought process that I had in asking you all those questions for an hour. Because what I do first is build the signature story. And the signature story has 3 core pillars. And the core pillars are who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring. And so I actually love that you pulled out your notepad from way back when we initially got together, and you had some of these things written down, because a lot of that was the value that you bring, right? But I think that what a lot of people tend to miss, and you can talk about this a little bit more, is when I talk about those pillars, who you are, what you do, value you bring, I say those in that order for a reason. My professional opinion, and this has been proven out time and again, is that who you are is the most important thing. So, Greg, let me ask you this. What did you and your wife, who knows you and loves you, what did you read or see or perceive in that resume that you thought, okay, this really captures who I am in the first place?
I think it was that first phrase, the disruptive thinker, right? I mean, those 2 words really you can just sit there and I could say, okay, what does that mean to you? And you start getting to innovation, you get to game changing, you get to reframing, galvanizing, all the other words that you chose after that. But really, because what I would go around, I would tell people is I'm a change agent, right? I'm a disruptor, right? Calling yourself a disruptor, I think, has more of a negative connotation than disruptive thinker, right? Disruptor is going to come in and be a bull in our business, and we don't want that. But disruptive thinker, to me, and that these phrases are written down because these weren't my phrases; these were Julie's phrases. This is what she got out of me in an hour, which, and in 28 years of a work history, that's an accomplishment alone. But it was those phrases that then, when it got to the interview portion, I think I'm somewhat well-spoken. I think I can represent myself. But when you start having these as part of that pillar of this is who I am, and I can demonstrate who I am, and my resume will then demonstrate results of who I am. And then you get to the point of, okay, so what are we really talking about?
That is so important too, because it's important to go beyond just those words, right? So disruptive and innovator, back in the day, the whole big resume phrase was that, I do strategic planning, something like that. This is what everybody said on their resumes. And, I push back on that a little bit. And, I want to go a little bit deeper. Well, what does that actually mean that you actually do? And when I asked people that, some had an answer, which was actually valid, and some people didn't, which goes to show that you can't just write words on the resume that say whatever, and you can't back them up. So you and I had that discussion. Okay, disruptive, what does that actually mean?
Right.
Innovator, what did you actually innovate? That's the only way I was going to use those words on the resume. And I think it played out well because you were able to back that up with story instead of just having, $1 million words. $1 million words don't mean anything if you can't tell a story behind them.
And $1 million results help too.
That's right. So let's go ahead and get into that, because the second pillar is what you do. So it's who you are, what you do. What do you feel like the difference was in your resume when it came to capturing those results that maybe you didn't have before or didn't express before you and I got together?
I've always found, again, I'm 50, I'm not new to the resume game, right? I've had a resume for a long time, a lot of different versions of it, but I think everybody struggles with what goes in and what stays out. Is it 1 page? Is it 2 page? How much details on that job from 99 do you really need to include? And having an expert that could say, give me one accomplishment at each of these jobs. I actually had to go pull old resumes from 15 and 20 years ago for Jewel, because she's like, go find it. I know you have it somewhere. And I did. I had it on an old version that never made it through to version 30. And then she was able to piece all that together. And again, same thing. My new employer approached me last week and said they're doing a press release on my hire. And I know they had me. And I know they had the resume that Jewel wrote, because they were able to translate without having a conversation with me. They wrote a whole press release off of my resume, and probably my LinkedIn profile too, it had a lot of this same stuff in there, these accomplishments, this thing. So it really is one of those processes that benefits you from start to finish, and the finish is well beyond the offer.
That is so great to hear. Now, actually, take us to the part of the story where you talk about how this opportunity came about. Did you find them? Did they find you? What happened there?
No, I found them. I've had certain geographic considerations I was looking at. I actually, if I had let this go more than 65 days, there would have been more offers. I had other people that I was engaged with in the process, but this opportunity moved swiftly. I mean, 4 interviews in 10 days to an offer. So I had a couple other things that I thought were very intriguing, but obviously I took this one. This is the one I wanted. But the resume was opening doors. The parallel between the LinkedIn profile and the resume, I can't stress enough. I sat there at the moment going, do I spend the extra money and do I do the LinkedIn profile as well? And the answer is yes, because the two work independently. And there's a couple different layers to that. One, if you go to your LinkedIn profile and it's a mirror image of your resume, to me, that's empty. You're not adding any value to the reader. I have a lot of people that I know, because I paid for the premium LinkedIn to see who's looking at my profile. And as soon as you're in the conversation for a job, there's people all over the organization looking at you, right? So they don't have access to your resume either, but that story told itself. And I think it adds value to the person who has seen your resume in putting together, wow, we really got somebody impressive. And I had a meet and greet with my new team Thursday, and I can tell you that the resume and the LinkedIn profile set the table beautifully, because they didn't come in like, oh, let's see who this guy is. They were like, who is this? Because what we've read so far intrigues us. And again, it's subtle, it's little details, but to me, they're huge, and they really change the experience.
And we're going to hear part 2 of Greg's story in our next episode. The way Greg turned his job search around was by taking the first step. The same first step you're invited to take as well, friends. What we do is hold a free new job game plan with you. And you can get it by going to 90dayoffer.com/game plan. Your new job game plan is with me or the team. Here's what we're going to talk about. What's going on in your current job search situation now? Why you're searching right now? What's put you into this job market? How the search is going right now, and how we may be able to help. It's important for us to be able to hear about your story and hear about your situation in order to recommend what will be helpful to you. 90dayoffer.com/game plan is a place to go. The new job game plan calls about 15 minutes. We'll answer all the questions that you could have possibly thought of, plus probably ones you didn't even think to ask. I want to make sure that you learn how to articulate who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring, because this is going to be critical to increasing your rate of resume responses. Okay, here's a 3-part framework: who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring. So let's use Garrett's resume as an example. This is the before version. And so what he's saying in his professional overview: an innovative and results-oriented purchasing professional with a strong business sense, who offers extensive management experience in a production environment, warehouse management, and plant operations, along with expertise in materials management and coordination. Side note, skills and expertise, my goodness, that looks like 30 things, and we're not even seeing the bottom of the list. That's way too many things. You really have to tighten up this skills and expertise section, friends, because you can't claim to be expert in 35 things. So just bear that in mind. Not necessarily the focus of what we're talking about now, but just another point that is important. So let's look at the professional overview. What he's saying is an innovative and results-oriented whatever, purchasing professional, sales professional, operations leader. The problem is starting with innovative and results-oriented. You didn't hear me say that in our first example. The reason that we don't talk about being innovative and results-oriented is because, number one, it's self-congratulatory, okay? Number two, if you think about it, everybody's innovative. Everybody's results-oriented, at least when it comes to the resume. So the problem is when you're using these self-congratulatory and truly empty imposter faux keywords, the only thing that you're doing is making yourself look exactly like everybody else. This is what everybody says. Innovative and results-oriented. Here's one more issue. You never say these things in a normal conversation. When it comes to the end of the work week, you're sitting there at happy hour, just kind of decompressing and talking with a good friend or two or three. You never sit there and speak out of your mouth and call yourself innovative. You never speak out of your mouth any sentence in which you say to a friend or colleague, oh yeah, I'm results oriented. The only time these words actually come into our lexicon is on a resume. So that's not what we want to do. Here's what we do want to do. So he's going for director of purchasing. And what we want to do is take a look at what they're calling for in the job description. So there's a litmus test that you can use, and this is what you're going to ask yourself. When I'm reading the job description, what are 3 major duties that are central to the job that Mr. Future Employer would be reaching into his back pocket every 2 weeks to give me a paycheck to come in and actually do? What are 3 core duties central to this job that the employer would be cutting me a paycheck every 2 weeks to come in and actually do? So let's take a look at this job description. Ultimately responsible for procuring quality products and services at a reasonable cost. Okay, that's a core duty for a director of purchasing. Now, by the way, we're never going to say responsible for. That's a little bit beside the point. That first sentence is a core duty. What else? Next sentence says, directs the daily operation of the purchasing function. That's a core duty. Third, ensures that all parks, casinos, service, and operating standards are consistently met. That is more of a general duty. If you're going to be the director of purchasing, then you should be making sure that the standards are met. I wouldn't necessarily pay too much attention to that one. Next, ensures compliance with federal, state, and local regulations. Once again, same comment as applied to the sentence before. Let's see if we can find one more. First bullet, oversees and reviews purchasing requisitions to ensure compliance with established policy and proper accounting codes. That's a regular duty. Prepares purchase order change notices. Nope. Maintains procurement records to include all pertinent information about purchases. Nope. Negotiates with vendors and identifies products and services that will best meet the needs of the requisitioner based on specs and timing requirements. So let's take this part about negotiating with vendors, and we're actually going to change that into something different. So if we do talk about that, the point of negotiating with vendors is to optimize spend, is to get the biggest bang for your buck. So something that has to do with money like that is definitely going to be one of those core duties that the employer is going to be cutting you a paycheck to come in and do every 2 weeks. So let's talk about who you are. purchasing director, who procures the highest quality products and services at the most cost-effective rates. So what are we doing here? We're saying who you are. We're saying the level that you're on. So director level in purchasing, that's what you do. More of what you do is procuring the highest quality products and services. And then right there in that first sentence, you're already talking money because you do that at the most cost-effective rate. And then when it comes to what you do and the value you bring, that's the reason that we're looking for 3 core duties that the employer would be cutting you a paycheck to come in and do. So let's talk about expertise. Expertise is identifying the optimal products and services and leading vendor negotiations. That is a great and very specific area of expertise. And then when we talk about the value that you bring, the value that you bring will be a unique combination of a certain set of skills. So before we talked about not having, these probably 35 skills that we see before us now. What we want to do is really zero in on what is absolutely most important. For example, you see towards the bottom of column 1, I wouldn't recommend putting Microsoft Office Suite all the way up there. That's taking up some prime resume real estate. And at this point in time, that's not really a feather in your cap that you know Microsoft Office Suite. So that's just one simple example. The other thing is when you have a long list, you have to make sure that you're not repetitive. Let's just stick with column 1. The 5th point is sales, and the last point is inside sales. That shouldn't be the case. See, when the list gets too long, you start repeating yourself. So let's go ahead and get into the value that you bring. This is where we're bringing in some areas where Garrett delivers impact. Scope of impact extends across production, warehouse management, plant management, and materials. So that's how we put those 3 components together: who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring. Those 3 sentences will comprise that professional summary right there at the top of the resume. If you feel like you want help in getting your resume response rate up, more calls back, and more interviews, make sure you take advantage right now of our new job game plan call at 90dayoffer.com/game plan. It's 15 minutes of us talking about your background story, what's going on in your job search right now, what you're thinking you'd like to do next. If you're not getting enough responses, we'll talk about that. If you're interviewing but not getting offers, we'll talk about that. We talk about whatever point in the job search you're in right now and what you feel like you need help with. The new job game plan is private and one-on-one. Share your story with me or a specialist on our team, and you'll get some thoughts and recommendations on what to do next so that you have specific, concrete steps going forward. On the next episode of the Get Hired Show, how to get the employers and recruiters to come to you. Be sure to join us right here Friday at noon Eastern Time.